We need to talk.
137.
It would be safe to say in the investment world, change isn't coming. It's already here.
The world has been galvanized into action. What can we do to contribute to a more equitable society?
The future belongs to those who adapt, those who identify shortcomings and unlock value.
A quantum leap was necessary.
I think you understate the situation. It isn't necessary. It's essential if we're to build any kind of a future.
We have to ask ourselves, what can we do to invest in the right places, for the right reasons? Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the only thing to do.
The warmest welcome to this edition of Critical Conversations brought to you by Sanlam Investments. My name is Lerato Mbele. Maya Angelou, a renowned American poet, once said, "People will forget what it is you said. They will not forget how you made them feel." And those feelings are born of incremental actions and gestures that bring about something positive in your life. Today we are talking about impact, and it's born of the positive incremental steps that bring about change in our institutions, our communities, and our countries. We are putting impact at the heart of our conversations on sustainability, the impact that can be made organizationally, through investments, and through a consciousness around the broader community in which our investment community and our asset managers operate. We're going to be hearing the testimonies of leading executives who have brought impact into the framework of their day-to-day work. It's impact that changes South Africa for the better. We're also speaking within the context of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the goals that we've referred to consistently throughout Critical Conversations over the last 2 years. There are 17 goals that provide a roadmap. We'll focus on a few of them today, but ultimately that is the blueprint of what's needed to make the world more functional, more equitable, more just and fair. People are at the heart of our conversations, the planet is at the heart of our conversations, and shared prosperity is too. So welcome to this edition of Critical Conversations. We value your time, we value input. So let me tell you a little bit about how the platform works at large. So you can join the conversation via your social media platforms, Twitter and LinkedIn. Simply use the hashtag Critical Conversations, and also remember to tag us on the handle @Sanlam Invest. We'd also love for you to post your questions, which can be asked in real time to our panelists. All you have to do is use the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen, and in that way your questions come through in real time, and I'll post them on your behalf. In fact, you'll make me sound cleverer than what I am. And when you do drive the conversation online, remember to tag @Sanlam Invest, hashtag Critical Conversations, hashtag SustainSA, hashtag the future is sustainability, and act for impact, acting for impact. So let me introduce you to our leaders who themselves have embraced the principle of impact, both in the ethos and also in the investment strategy. First up, we have Nelson Naidu, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Sanlam Investments. He's a firm believer in investing for good, and he's used his role and platforms to really drive conversations within the asset management fraternity, encouraging managers to just do the right thing. We're also joined by Mervyn Shanmugam, who is the CEO of Alternatives at Sanlam Investments. As the name suggests, alternative means to be different. And so he's going to give us a sense of what it is to invest in an unorthodox manner for the transformation of society at large. Also here in Cape Town with us is Martinus van der Nest, the head of Amplify Investment Partners, an asset manager that doesn't mind getting their hands dirty. From his testimonies, you're going to hear about how they get deep into communities, especially remote communities, really leading the charge against rhino poaching, and also driving resources that fund grants for education, particularly in rural South Africa. And finally, streaming in all the way from the COP27 UN Conference on Climate Change in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, is Andrew Johnston, the CEO of the Climate Fund Managers. It's been said that of all the modern day crises, climate change is the foremost crisis that affects all humanity across geography, class, and strata. And so we're going to get a view from Egypt as to what's really important, what's on the agenda, and how that can influence our conversations on sustainability at large. Again, please may we encourage you to participate in the conversation using Twitter and LinkedIn, hashtag critical conversations, hashtag acting for impact, and remember to tag us at Sanlam Investments. Without further ado, let's get a view from our esteemed panel as to what impact means, because I think definitionally, if that's even such a word, definitionally, impact could mean many different things to anybody, and it's very subjective. But for you, Nelson Naidu, impact?
For me, Lerato, simply it means change just one person's life for the better.
Martinus?
I agree with Nathan on that point, but for me also it is important to get started. Find a cause that you believe in and get started.
Don't waste any time. Mervyn?
For me, it's living in a more equal society.
Equitable. Okay, Andrew?
So nobody's giving you a
Andrew, can you hear me out there in Egypt? What does impact mean to you?
Sorry, Lerato. Yes. Hi. Apologies for the background noise. As you mentioned, I'm actually at COP. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of noise going on, but it's a real treat to be here and join you this morning. Thanks for the opportunity. So, Lerato, for me, the impact is really all about focus and scale.
Yeah.
So the key things is be focused on what you want to try do, and secondly, replicate it.
Yeah.
Doing anything for the first time is tough. Once you got it, replicate it.
Okay, so find repetitive actions that have a meaningful impact, get started, change someone's life, but more importantly, create equilibrium, equity, social justice. And I think that's at the heart of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, that blueprint that we refer to, those 17 goals. And as you can see, we're all wearing pins to remind us that there is actually a path we can follow and an alignment we can pursue. What you'll also see throughout the course of this morning's conversation are some images that roll on our video wall, and they are real images taken from within the organizations, Amplify Alternative, Sanlam Investments, as to what colleagues, staff, their families and communities have been doing day to day authentically to try to embrace a greater consciousness of creating an impact. So we're going to be looking at, and you're going to constantly see us referring to issues of life on land and what to do within the context of our environmental circumstances, within agriculture, and also within some of our poorer communities, and then within the broad infrastructure area where climate change really plays itself out. So when you see these images, it's because it's actually being done day to day by you and many of your colleagues, and for that we do commend you. Let's ask you also, as our viewers, to give us a sense of what matters to you, and so we're going to be having a poll in which you're going to tell us which issues really matter to you. Let's start with the first of our polls. And the question is, in which of the following UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, are you most interested in? Is it SDG 2, which is zero hunger? Is it SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth? Could it be reduced inequality, which is SDG number 10? Could it be climate action? SDG 13, or could it be life on land, SDG number 15? You are most welcome to vote now and just give us a sense of what you think. 722 of you are present. We thank you for it. Already 356 of you have cast your vote. We're waiting for the balance as you tell us which of the SDGs, there's 17, yes, but of the 5 that we've kind of synthesized and crystallized for you, which matter? Zero hunger, number 2, decent work and economic growth, number 8, SDG 10, to reduce inequality in our society. Could it be climate action? SDG 13. Could it be life on land? So let's have a view as to what all of you have to say. So quite a few of you, coming in at 41%, is decent work. 14% of you say reducing inequality. Climate action comes in at 24%. Life on land, 4%. So for the majority of our participants, it seems as though economic growth and decent work matters most, followed by zero climate action and then zero hunger. Nelson Naidu, let's have a conversation about this in terms of what it is that people are feeling. And the sense is that we can talk about a range of issues, but in this context, decent work, economic growth, the macro stuff. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I must say I'm slightly surprised by that result. I thought, decent work certainly should have featured. I think I would have expected reduced inequalities to feature a little bit more strongly in the context of what's happening in South Africa. But I guess the two are somewhat linked. I think if you think about what's happening in the context of the world at the moment, we had 40-year highs of inflation in developing economies, or developed economies rather, in developing economies, 20-year highs in inflation. We're seeing protests in developed countries now around cost of living. We know we've got very high unemployment here in South Africa. So I guess when you think about what is needed to start addressing some of those challenges, then economic growth is one of them. Decent work would be at the top of everybody's mind, I think, in dealing with some of these inflationary challenges that we're facing. So maybe in that context, it's not entirely surprising. But I think for a country like ours, where inequality is so rife, I would have thought we would have seen a bit
much
more
higher
of that.
one. Okay, let's talk about impact, because that's why we're here today. There is making an impact in someone's life, and then there's actually taking tangible steps, Nelson, to create an impact. So there's impact and impact investing. What's the difference?
So I think if I were to reach over and punch my colleague Martinez here, he would certainly feel a little bit of impact. But that's not the type of impact that we're actually talking about. If we go back to the discussion we just had, there's a lot of problems in the world. There's a lot of hungry people. There's a lot of people who don't have jobs, who can't provide for themselves. Andrew will tell us a lot more about all of the climate challenges that we're facing later. It's not hard for us to see if we think just what's happening here in South Africa. We're seeing floods around the country. We're seeing drought in the country. We are already seeing the effects of climate change. We know all about the issues around gender inequality, education, poverty we see every day as we drive around. So when we talk about impact in the context of the discussion that we're having here today, it is about how we change those things. How do we make a meaningful and lasting change to all of those challenges that we as a world and we as humans are facing at the moment. So now you want to do that. So you have an idea of what impact you're trying to make, and then you need some sort of mechanism to actually deliver on that. And from a impact investing perspective, you can think about impact investing as the mechanism that we use to actually deliver on that impact. How do we mobilize capital from an investment perspective, which is the business that we are all in, to actually start making a meaningful impact and shifting those things?
So Martinez, when you get up from the bloody nose that Nelson would have landed,
making an impact,
making an impact, how do you go about setting an impact plan? And I'll tell you why I say this. It's become such a buzzword now, impact investing, impact funds, measuring that impact. So how do you actually go about creating the building blocks for it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll talk out of personal experience, right? So, as you alluded to in the introduction, we are involved with sandparks and rhino conservation. So, I sit 2,000 kilometers away from that in Cape Town.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know a little bit what's going on there, but the action plans are effectively made by the individuals that are working in that environment. So, effectively, you know, we have many conversations with the people there, and they tell us what the needs are that they have in that environment.
Right.
And we then jump on top of that and support them in those initiatives. So as an example, you know, currently, you know, one of the things that are having a massive impact in the rhino conservation is the dehorning of rhinos. So about a year ago, I spoke to the gentleman from the Environmental Crime Investigation Services, and they decided they're going to start dehorning because, you know, it's been a lively debate within rhino conservation whether to dehorn or not to dehorn. And, you know,
And when you say dehorn, you mean in a controlled manner?
In a controlled manner. So effectively what they're trying to do is dehorn the 3,000 remaining rhinos that are in Kruger National Park. They want to dehorn all of them.
So they're not vulnerable?
So they're not vulnerable.
Okay.
Effectively what that happens, so the knock-on effect of that is, if three poachers, typically poachers are three people that enter a park. They earn 100,000 Rand per horn that they take off.
Yeah.
But they have to kill the rhino, right?
Yeah.
If you, by dehorning, they're taking the volume off the horn. So now those three people are getting paid 20,000 Rand to dehorn.
Yeah.
If you think about it, you are putting your life at risk in order to
save,
to go and poach the rhino, because you know you're walking in Big Five country first of all at night without a light, so that's not very good. But there's also people obviously trying to prevent you from doing it. So just by taking the volume off, it's no longer worth risking your life for 20,000 Rand divided by 3.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, the incursions into the park has reduced dramatically, and the number of rhinos that are being poached has reduced. So there's the plan. We then execute on that plan, and then we can measure the impact by the number of rhinos that have been poached.
So there are metrics to impact. What makes you feel invested in impact, Mervyn?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I remember growing up in the last days, you know, of apartheid, you know, seeing the division, you know, in the country. Very difficult time for us as we, you know, progressed through, you know, through democracy. But also, I also saw the benefits, you know, of having a democracy. You know, the number of people that moved up from LSM 1, 2, 3 to 4, 5, 6, being able to live in, you know, better neighborhoods, having access to better jobs, being able to perform skilled jobs, you know, access to education. So those were like really, really positive things for me. So I spent like most of my career trying to reduce inequalities, you know, spent a lot of time in my career helping black companies, you know, finding solutions for them with little capital to participate in the economy, to grow those companies. So that's what's, so that's where, you know, I come from.
Yeah. Because we talk about democracy as a political concept, but democracy is also an economic concept.
Oh, absolutely. And if you think about it, I mean, the greatest beneficiaries of our democracy, I feel, is the retail sector. I mean, that has absolutely, you know, blossomed, you know, with so many new entrants be able to afford higher quality products, you know, in the market.
Andrew, let's talk about the impact play for sustainability in South Africa, because again, sustainability is broken down into 3 components: people, the planet, and shared prosperity. So in a South African context, how does it all come together?
Thanks, Timmy. Lorenzo, thanks. I just want to go back to my earlier response and maybe build on what my colleagues have just said, is that I'm an engineer. So I think about impact from an engineering perspective. And for me, impact means change. The point of impact investing is actually to use money to bring about change. But it's important to understand what change it is that we're seeking to achieve. You know, we live in a world which is continuously in flux, and that flux will continue regardless of what we do. So as an impact investor or an impact player, it's important to try to identify what exactly is the impact you're seeking to make and what are you seeking to change. So in the context of all the issues facing South Africa, which are numerous, um, Nelson referred to some: inflation, interest rates, cost of living. We still are being impacted by supply chain issues which arise from COVID. That hasn't gone away yet. We are being impacted by climate and climate change. So all things are changing around us. And what we need to try to do is identify those things that are important to us, those things that we can change, and be focused on how we change it. Now, as you know, I'm a climate guy. So for me, climate change is paramount, and we'll talk a little bit about it. But it can't be seen in isolation. Nelson also referred earlier on. I mean, I think there are three parts to this triangle. There's climate change up at the top. There's development. There's humanity and good living and quality of life, and there's sustainability. And part of sustainability is the biodiversity. All the things that actually we need around us to actually support this, which talk to the rhinos. So I see it in that holistic way of, and the peculiarities of South Africa are peculiar to South Africa, but they are micro subsets of what's actually needed or happening around the world.
So everything comes together. I love the reference to the fact that he's an engineer. I've been told that to build a great team, to get stuff done, you need to have an engineer, an athlete, a dreamer, and a sage. So we've already got one engineer. You would be the?
Second.
The dreamer. The second engineer.
Sage.
I think I'm the dreamer.
The dreamer. We need an athlete here, gentlemen. We need an athlete here. Okay, there are some questions that are coming through, and I'll go to you, Mervyn, because they say, of all the SDGs we've spoken about, we haven't spoken about education. So how do we intersperse education as part of the solution?
Yeah, I think if you look at, education, very interesting, stats, in our country. If you look at, the level of enrollment in public schools versus private schools in the country, I think the enrollment in public schools is like 1%. The growth rate is 1% per annum.
Yeah.
And the growth rate in private schools is 44% per annum, which is staggering, right? Which tells you that we've got a real problem. But the problem we have is that not everybody can afford, those private schools. And there's a part of our population which we call the missing middle, where there are not enough facilities, and that goes, that also goes for things like affordable housing, student accommodation, healthcare. So, there's lots of opportunities in, in that market where we can actually get together as private sector and try and support them.
Right. Nelson, Venan says, if we have economic growth and we have decent work, then all the others should address every other SDG, says Venan.
Yeah, I don't think Venant is entirely wrong. Maybe just before we get off the education point, I saw an interesting stat the other day which surprised me a little bit, because I think we talk about education a lot in South Africa, and clearly, as Mervyn pointed out, it is a problem. But when you benchmark us relative to other emerging economies, as a percentage of GDP, we're not way out of line in terms of how much we spend on education. So our problem is not really that we're not spending enough on education in the context of broader emerging economies. It's the quality of education that we're getting, and that's really the thing that we have to address, which I think talks a little bit to this public school, private school point. But when you then think about the other conversation that we often have, is the one around jobs. But fundamentally, to actually shift the jobs problem, you need growth. Which I think is what Venant is pointing to. So if you can stimulate growth in an economy and you can start getting growth, then you contribute to better education, or you create more jobs, you get better education, you get the cycle gets going, and then you have funding to address some of the other issues. So I don't think he's off the mark entirely, but there's a lot of fundamental building blocks that first have to go in place to actually address that.
Shingi sort of reiterates this point, Martina, saying the logic is that decent work and growth will in themselves reduce inequality, which is a major contributor. So there is the sense that South Africa has a very particular context. But here's an interesting question from Yakis Botma. Life on land? Question mark, question mark, question mark. What's that all about?
So life on land, again, speaks to, conserving whether it is, the biodiversity. And so it incorporates forests and, everything that is effectively life on land.
Yeah.
Getting back to where we are, so, you need to look at the interdependence between the different SDGs. So, let's use the example of the rhino now, right? So, effectively what you have is you've got people globally who will come to South Africa to come and see the Big Five.
Yeah.
Now, if the Big Five is here and it's one of the best places to see the Big Five, you have all this tourist dollars coming in, or pounds or euros. That money is spent. That money then drives economic growth. In the tourism sector, if we take that as a microcosm, that creates jobs. That then supports inequality, reducing inequality.
Right.
Reduces poverty, reduces and sorts out the hunger problem. So, you can't look at it in isolation of each other. They all work together.
So you need to connect the dots for you to see what that small step is and what its broader relevance in the society is. Andrew, quickly, anonymous attendee says, from a climate investment point of view, what do you find most challenging? Is it raising funds or deploying the funds? Oh my gosh, I think we're having a sound problem in Egypt. I'll come back to you with that question in a moment, Andrew. But just as we wind down this question of defining impact, let's go back to you, Nursing, and let's ask the relationship you have with Rebecca. What are the key learnings? Because obviously we've been having these conversations about impact in different guises throughout the year. And where do relationships come into play to create that impact?
Yeah, so I think maybe the first thing to say is that a lot of our conversation here is centered around impact investing, which tends to be very direct and what you can see. You can save a rhino, you can build a school and see how many people get educated at the school. The other side of things is, what you do through the companies that you invest in, where ESG frameworks are a little bit more prominent. So if I'm going to invest in Sasol, how do I, engage with the management of Sasol to get them to think about decarbonization and so forth? The reason we got into a partnership with Rebecca is because they're a recognized leader in sustainable investing. They've been doing it for 25 years. They're amongst the best asset managers in the world when it comes to doing this. A couple of years ago, as a business, we decided to take sustainable investing a lot more seriously, both from an impact perspective, but also from what we do in the listed space, where we have to engage with the companies that we invest our clients' money in. And we realized that it's quite a journey that you have to go on here, and if you're going to do it properly and you need to do it seriously, or you want to do it seriously, then you need a partner.
Right.
That's the reason we got into the partnership with Rebecca. I think that the things we've learned are that you have to invest significantly in your business if you want to do this properly. There's a lot of school fees to be paid. There's a lot of governance and frameworks that you have to put in around it. But also at the end of the day, that if you do it properly, you do see meaningful results. I think for us, one of the biggest proof points in the Rebecca partnership is you often get this question: if you're going to invest for sustainability, whether that's impact or ESG, are you actually compromising the financial returns that you offer your investors? Is it a trade-off between doing good and making money? And the answer, and we can see it very clearly in what Rebecca's done, is there isn't a trade-off. You can actually improve the financial returns that you offer your clients if you invest sustainably. And I think that partnership has done a lot for us to fast track us on our development. And the last thing I'll say is, as a more general point, achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or making an impact, or contributing to a more sustainable world, it's not a competition. It's something that we all need to work together to achieve, and partnerships are one of the ways that we actually can do that.
Right. We're in conversation here in this edition of Critical Conversations with Nursing Naidu, Martinez van der Nest, Andrew Johnston, and also Mervyn Shanmugam. We are talking about acting for impact. It's not just a word, it's an action, it's a verb. And what are some of the things that can be done within the investment space to really trickle down constructively and meaningfully in the society around you. I do acknowledge that we've had a few sound issues, and for that we do apologize. Obviously, in the South African context, network is impacted by load shedding, and in the Egyptian context, Andrew's in the desert. What would you expect? But we're doing the best we can. We're innovating for impact with regards to the technology as well. Martinez, I want to just turn the corner a little bit. Obviously, for you, what's important is life on land, and you've qualified what that means. And earlier on, you referred to the work that you do regarding anti-rhino poaching. So according to the Africa Rhino Specialist Group, there are currently 22,137 rhinos on the African continent. More than 6,000 are black rhinos, and 15,942 are white rhinos. White not because of their color, because white, they've got wide lips. I know that much. But in a country like Botswana, they've deployed the national army to protect the rhino. That's how important a national issue of conservation and preservation this is. What about the rest of the world? What about the rest of the continent in terms of our understanding of why this is a fundamental issue? So let's talk about your goals, a little bit more about the work you've done, and not just anti-poaching, Martinez, but you've also partnered with the Good Work Foundation towards education. Tell us more.
So, I mean, effectively, our story kind of began by going to the Kruger National Park, going to a horrible scene with three rhinos being poached within 150 meters of each other. We go with the guys from the Environmental and Crime Investigation Services, open the rhinos up to find the bullets, which they use then for the ballistic evidence in case they catch the poacher at a later stage. And effectively, sitting there, they open up the first cow and they take out this effectively a fully formed rhino calf. And right there, what has happened? One rhino got poached, but effectively two rhinos got killed there. And being surrounded by those mostly gentlemen, seeing grown men cry as they go through that process, and they've done hundreds, some of them thousands of carcasses over the years. So the numbers you quoted there now, if you look at what's happened in the Kruger National Park, it's gone from 10,000 to 3,000. So effectively 70% of the rhinos have been poached. So I sat with the guys, still that evening, and we discussed it, and I said, how do I kind of get more involved in it? And the story from them was very clear, is that I can't do anything in the Kruger to assist them. But to go back to Cape Town, to look at my personal circumstances, my personal life here, and figure out a way in which we can support and contribute towards them. And it was at that time that Amplify, was offered to me as to head up. And Nelson and I had a discussion around the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals for Sanlam Investments in general. And decided that's the way to go. And so that's where we effectively started on this journey. And then when you're in it and you start talking to people and you find out a little bit more about it, you very quickly understand that in the areas surrounding the Kruger National Park, it is some of the most impoverished areas in the country. Right? And I'm specifically talking about the Bushbuck Ridge area. And so if you don't sort out the issues in the areas surrounding the park, it is impossible to sort out the issues inside the park.
Right.
And you're sitting with youth unemployment in excess of 60%. We're talking a little bit about education earlier. Very poor quality of education. Your English teacher it's definitely not their first language. So when you come out of that environment, you are certainly at a disadvantage to other children.
So what I'm hearing you say is that if you can address the poverty, the lack of opportunity, the social conditions in the community, you reduce the propensity for people to being tempted to being poachers for a buck.
Absolutely. And and so the Good Work Foundation, they've got 7 campuses in that area. There's 7,000 scholars that come through their campuses on a weekly basis. And then they've got 2 academies, an IT academy and a hospitality academy, and so we provide grants to those students. all with the idea that it creates an opportunity for them to find employment.
And where do they find the employment?
So Good Work Foundation themselves have set up a call center where the graduates from the IT Academy can find a job. The benefit of that, same as the hospitality actually, is that those individuals don't have or were not forced to leave their communities in order to find a job. They can stay there and support their dependents. And then in the Hospitality Academy, if you just think about the area that is there, it is covered by lodges and hotels.
Right.
So, you know, the demand came from the lodges and from the hotels to say that they want to support and employ people from the local community, but that those people didn't have the required skills. And so Good Work Foundation has then started the academy to provide the people with the skills, and then they can find employment at those lodges.
And I think what you're demonstrating there is that asset managers don't have to wear their blinkers. They don't have to look at the world only in metrics. They can look at those statistics and attach names, faces, experiences to it, and then you know what it is you're trying to do. Okay, a 360 viewpoint. Tiny Shy says, Mervyn, does Sanlam also look for opportunities in broader development-oriented impact investments, such as organizations that help empower poor women in rural areas to start businesses to sustain themselves?
Yeah, I think Lerato, so small businesses are very important for us. You know, we've been investing in small businesses for a very long period of time. And, you know, very happy to say that that is also a female-led team, you know, that's been building that business. You know, they built that business, I think it's 50 times the size, you know, from the time they started it. And what we look for in transactions or investments, you know, in small businesses, you know, definitely has some angle on reducing inequalities. So the participation of women, you know, in companies, in our management teams, in our investment committees, even at shareholder level, you know, is extremely important. Obviously, it's difficult to reach, you know, to reach, you know, all of the, you know, marginalized groups. But we try through, you know, various funding mechanisms to provide funding to companies who will also try to empower, you know, to empower women as well. So we have a few companies, you know, in our portfolio where we we're supporting, you know, to grow their businesses, and we are definitely seeing increased participation of women in investments and in business.
I think, Andrew, let's try your line again. We can't even begin to have a conversation around socioeconomic transformation, change, denting poverty, helping rural communities, if we can't even sort out a basic thing like electricity. And that would really fall within the ambit of the work that you do. We're sitting here with this major crisis in South Africa, and it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care whether it's urban or rural, SME or big industry. We're all in it. And so when we're talking sustainability in South Africa, impact, rural development, where does this energy issue come into play?
So Lerato, it's a big question, but I want to, if I may, try to simplify what it is that makes it all connected, because I think some of the themes that are coming out of this conversation is actually the interconnectedness of both impact and aspirationally, as well as the interconnectedness of what finance can do, because we're all finance people. We here as Sanlam executives, and really out to achieve impact as one of finance. But notwithstanding that, both of those are quite esoteric concepts. I'd like to take a slight step back and try to connect the dots between the rhinos, the landscapes, the climate change, and the rest, and being engineers. And the answer, the connecting dot of all of that is carbon, because we are all carbon. We're made up of carbon. Trees are made of carbon. Elephants and rhinos are made of carbon. And carbon goes through various cycles. It's in a physical form, which is a good thing, and it's in a gaseous form, which is a bad thing. And then it comes back again and turns back into a physical form, which is a good thing. And the problem we have at the moment is that carbon cycle has got out of whack. And as a result of that, there is too much carbon in a gaseous form. And because it has this greenhouse gas effect, it's making things hotter in the atmosphere. And the atmosphere is a very, very thin layer of gases upon which we all depend. And everything we do, whether it's education, whether it's rhinos, whether it's whether it's raising families, it's all reliant on this little layer of gas, the atmosphere. And so for me, what impact means is actually to stop doing the things we're doing, which is prejudicing the sustainability of that atmosphere.
Right.
Because unless we can do that, the issues that we deal with every day as people, be it education, be it crime, be it power, be it water, all of these challenges are going to become more and more difficult because the atmosphere will continue to throw bigger and bigger challenges at us. Just as a challenge of a drought, we'll then have a flood, and then we'll have a cyclone, and then we'll have a crop failure. And so all actually into. So while I do, obviously climate guy, so this is my view of the world, but all of the more parochial development impacts they talk about are all contextualized within this biosphere in which we live. And we really have got to get an understanding around that and action that.
Okay, so Andrew's saying climate is at the heart of it. I have to say, when he said we're all carbon, I'm like, I don't even know what to do anymore. They said we're all fish originally, and here we are. I'm not sure about all this evolutionary stuff. Okay, so, so Nelson, as we just wind down a little bit of this part of the conversation, education keeps coming up, addressing poverty keeps coming up, and as investment guys, as Andrew describes all of you, I'm wondering the synthesis between investing in social infrastructure versus hard infrastructure. So hard infrastructure is fixing the electricity issue. Social infrastructure is sorting out the schools. Those are some of the decisions that need to be made, and what are the conversations around it?
Yeah, so I don't think you can pick one or the other. So I think that's the first thing. So I think you get useful frameworks like the SDGs, which kind of give us an idea of where money needs to go, what is the source that the capital needs to end in. I think everybody has different perspectives on where you apply yourself and where capital should be applied. If you think around the table, Andrew's doing it in climate, Mervin's doing it in jobs, Martinez is doing it through life on land. So you have these frameworks. You have to choose the ones where you need to. Some of them are more social, like you say, and others are harder. The challenge in all of them, whichever ones you look at, really are funding. So the issue is that we are struggling to get funding into the right places or enough funding into the right places to address these issues. And the challenge for all of us is what are the mechanisms that we can use to inspire more people to actually apply funding to these things from an investment context, understanding that it's not gonna compromise financial returns. But at the end of the day, to answer the question directly, I couldn't pick between social and hard infrastructure. I think there'll be a lot of people out there who will say the social issues because of inequality are just overwhelmingly so big that we have to address those, and we won't be able to to address some of the harder infrastructure issues if we don't do that. Conversely, if you don't get hard infrastructure in, it's impossible to solve the social challenge.
People need to be working, people need to be educated. Just very quickly, ESG is a huge topic within the investment and asset management space. Compliance, figuring it out, and now we're adding impact to that. Are the two mutually exclusive?
No, they're not mutually exclusive, and I think there's depending on who you speak to, you'll get different definitions. Some people will say they're one and the same thing. I think the way we like to think about it is impact is more of the real and the tangible things that you can see, where you can see a direct benefit from where you apply your capital to what it delivers. A lot of what Mervin and Andrew do in their businesses, even what Martinez is talking about, the money we invest there, we can see the direct benefit of it, whether it's creating jobs or decarbonizing the atmosphere or whatever the case may be. ESG tends, at least in our world, to reference the frameworks that you use to engage with listed companies where we invest capital but don't have as direct a lever. So, we again, back to my earlier example, we can invest in Sasol or another company, but we're ultimately not in control of what happens, in those companies. So the frameworks that we use to influence, to try and engage with those companies to make sure they do the right things is really where the realm of ESG sits in our world. So they're not mutually exclusive. They're both trying to achieve the same things, but just in one's a more direct lever in the impact space, and the other one is a
Right.
slightly more indirect lever.
And also from the pictures on the video wall, you can see it's inclusive. It's not even about sort of the technicalities of investing. It's just the social stuff that you do at home, whether or not you recycle at home or you don't, whether or not you encourage your children to use their pocket money to invest in some charitable causes. It's the stuff we can all do that leads to an impact. So let me just get your sense again as our audience, and I thank you for your questions coming through. I'm trying to pose as many of them as I can, but let's ask you again, do you believe that investing in sustainable impact projects can be profitable? That's the question. Can investing in sustainable impact projects be profitable? Please vote now in the poll that comes up on your screens. And the answers available to you are absolutely, it's profitable. Sometimes it's profitable, almost never profitable, or you're simply not sure. Please vote now and give us a sense of what you think. Can investing in sustainable impact projects be profitable?
Confidence takes the lead. It says enough is enough. Confidence looks in the mirror and has the courage to say, we can do better, think bigger, look further, and find smart ways to invest in a more sustainable future. So confidence invests in people. It innovates and pushes boundaries. Confidence works hard and harder still to find investment solutions that make a meaningful difference to communities, our planet, and to our future. Confidence has integrity and vision. Confidence looks beyond wealth creation and finds a greater purpose. Confidence inspires a nation to invest in a future for all, a world where we can all flourish, while building a sustainable tomorrow. Because confidence knows a sustainable future is the best long-term investment we can make.
I've heard it said that confidence is quiet, insecurity is loud, and being quiet means you really are just attuned with your values. So when you invest confidently, it's because you know what you're doing is conscientious and the right thing to do. Let's get a sense of what many of you do believe is a constructive, profitable way of investing in a sustainable impact project. Almost 60% of our audience has participated in the poll, and 50% of you, half of you who voted, say absolutely sustainable impact projects are profitable. 40% of those of you who participated, that's 180 of you, said sometimes. Only 17 of you said almost never, and 26 said you're not sure. So I guess we can say the consensus view is that it's absolutely and sometimes. It's more positive than it is negative in terms of those who have participated. Again, please join the conversation using hashtag critical conversations, hashtag sustainable SA, hashtag acting for impact, and use these hashtags on your Twitter and LinkedIn accounts. Remember to tag us at Sanlam Invest. Andrew Johnston of the Climate Fund in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, where it's very, very hot, you've told us. Tell us about the conversations that are taking place at COP27, because moving in from the various Conference of Parties, UN Conference of Parties, seminars and sessions that have taken place, it seems as though the sticky issue is the modalities around climate financing. So what is it that world leaders think they're going to do differently now?
Okay, great question, and very topical, obviously. The COP conference, the conference of the parties hosted by the United Nations on an annual basis, is really a check-in for the world to get together, leaders of the world to get in, together with business and civil society, to see where we are in the journey. And the journey is actually mapped out in the Sustainable Development Goals. These 17 goals were established in 2015, and they set the pathway for collective action over 15 years to 2030 for us to get to a sustainable future. So only one of them, actually, SDG 13, deals specifically with climate, and all the rest deal with sustainability, recognizing that the biosphere is an integrated, sustainable whole. and no single part can actually exist in isolation of the other. So back in 2015 in Paris, signatories to the Paris Accord signed up to what are called national commitments in their contribution to a sustainable planet. And these are not consistent across the planet. They're not consistent across each country, but speak to each of the country's aspirations in terms of their own ability and their resources. Some of them talk to humanity issues. Some talk to biodiversity issues, job creation. There's and depending on and they have determined what their own NDCs are. Once a year, everyone gets together and says, how are we doing? How are we doing? And are we on track? Are we heading in the right direction? Are we measuring it correctly? Are we getting the right science to actually inform decisions? And this has been, I think everybody everybody is aware that we are actually losing this battle. The climate, our atmospheric temperatures are increasing. We can see it in the climate. If you just watch the Weather Channel, you can see that we're losing the battle.
Right. And why are we losing the battle? Because people pay lip service to a lot of these commitments, or it's just a really difficult issue to break down? Right, certainly.
It is the number one most difficult issue.
All right. Andrew, I'm going to have to interrupt you there. You are buffering, so we're definitely losing the battle against connectivity in the desert. So let's just give it a bit of a break and have this conversation here whilst we sort out your line. So Andrew's saying quite a few things. Every year, world leaders get together, say, how did we do? They say that a lot on a variety of issues, and then I don't know what comes of it. But this is a really serious one because we've seen flooding in KZN, as Mervyn referred to earlier on. We've had the El Nino droughts in South Africa. It's actually having a material impact on our day-to-day lives. What do you know about the science and what scientists are saying is the biggest challenge in getting this right?
Yeah, so I think I think we went through quite a period where people were questioning the science. You know, can you believe climate science? Is there such a thing? And you still get a fair number of people, I think, who would say that, look, it's all a waste of time. We shouldn't be thinking about this too much. I think that there are certain realities. So, you know, Andrew talked us through what goes on in the carbon cycle and what is happening. There's no disputing that. There's no disputing that ocean levels are rising and it's going to have a material impact on coastal cities. There's no disputing that St. Mark's Square in Venice was underwater in 2017. That the things we're seeing here, the floods in KZN, the drought in the Eastern Cape, these are all real things. Now, that all sets a frame that says whether you fundamentally believe that climate change is an existential threat or not is actually relevant. You should be doing something to at least slow the pace of what's happening, or make a material contribution to stopping all of these things that you referred to, whatever those things may be. With places like COP, I think we look up to those in charge, the governments, the ones who set policy, the ones who establish frameworks and regulations to guide us in getting to addressing these challenges. I think the problem we're having now is there are lots of geopolitical tensions in the world, unfortunately, between the US and China, between Russia and the rest of the developed world. And climate change or policies around climate change or doing things to address them are used as bargaining chips. And you would have heard a lot of the sentiment, and it would be good to get Andrew's view around what's happening
out there
in Egypt. That it's going to be a non-event, but hopefully we still see enough out of it that's going to give us some impetus towards positive change.
Martinez, I just want anecdotally for you to share. I mean, you have that interface with communities in the bush, the beautiful African savanna. Have you seen it getting hotter and hotter, harder and harder to do conservation work because of the environment?
Yeah, so I mean, it's certainly getting hotter, and I think one of the best evidence that you have of that is you have birds, and birds migrate between northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, and birds are staying longer in South Africa before they before their normal migratory path.
Yeah.
And that is something that you can just see in nature, which has changed due to global warming.
And Mervyn, there are lots of sort of buzzwords now. Decarbonization for South Africa, moving away from coal, very contentious conversation. Just transitions. How do you make it fair, for people to move into this greener, cleaner environment? Just from what you're reading, hearing, where does South Africa fit on this continuum?
Yeah, so I think, we've got to be honest. Most of our energy comes from coal, right? It's been like that for a very long time. But we also know the impact of climate, as Andrew and Nelson, have spoken about. So I think it is imperative for us, to follow the guidance, to contribute, towards net zero by 2050, which is going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And there are plans, right? And there are commitments that our governments have made. There's commitments from the International Partners Group who have pledged, 8.5 billion.
Yeah.
But we're going to lose a lot of jobs. I think the numbers quoted like about 150,000.
Yeah.
So how do we create, and this is what this just transition is about. It's about how do we move not only the workers but their families, which is probably one of the most stressful events that you can go through, in your life.
Yeah.
Moving, not only moving, moving from a job, but actually moving, moving to a different industry. Growing a community in a different industry. So that's what we got to figure out. But I think thankfully there's lots of opportunities in SA, especially on the social infrastructure side, where you might think of it as like a 2.7 trillion rand need that we have in affordable housing, in education, in healthcare, in rural retail developments. But it's also an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to do good and get great returns out of them.
Andrew, let's bring you in. I can see that your line is a little bit more stable now. So there are many issues that have come up. The first one is, why should South Africa be part of some global experiment on a green economy? We can barely keep the lights on, and now we're not even maintaining Eskom power stations simply because they're coal. It just seems as though the South Africans love to put up their hands for international protocols and don't solve for the realities on the ground. What do you make of that argument?
That's a great question. In my
Andrew, I hate to disappoint you, but I think the camels are really digging hard out there, interfering with the line. So let's try again. Your answer.
Can you?
Yeah, go.
Okay. Loretta, I don't think South Africa's got a choice but to go green. All of its trading partners are going green. The world is going green.
I don't know if it's the pharaohs or the camels, but something is not really working out for us in the desert. But let's get a view from you gentlemen here, is that South Africans are saying, first and foremost, to stimulate economic growth, we need energy. And it's fine, we need clean energy, but for right now, we just need energy. And if the source is coal, too bad. We can't be going to COP27, COP26, and putting up our hands to be part of decarbonization and all sorts of other things when we don't even have the basics right in South Africa. Your view on that one?
No, I think it's right. So, and I think the balance here is, as Mervyn said, we've got a coal-fired infrastructure in place, right? So, at the Eskom level at least. So that is there, and we have to figure out how we transition away from that into a greener energy source over time. That's not a switch on, switch off thing, and that's the case for most of Africa. But we have to do it. That's back to the climate point. We can't simply continue just putting off carbon into the atmosphere continually. So the question is not should you or shouldn't you, it's how do you get there and what's your transition over time. And then maybe slightly more controversially, I think within that is the question of what is the energy balance between what's provided by the state and what's provided by the private sector, and how does the private sector start becoming more of a contributor to energy production. But Mervyn may have more specific views.
Yeah, I think the point Andrew is going to make is that if we want to trade with international partners, we have to have a sustainable, renewable source of energy
Yeah.
for them to be able to trade with us. And we really want that, right? We wanna bring our goods and services up to high standards of production so that we can attract more foreign capital, into the country, which is really important for us,
Yeah.
right? To build our balance sheet. Yeah, so I agree with Andrew, but I also think energy security in South Africa, I think it's going to happen in any case.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the number of companies that are now putting up their own renewable plants,
Yeah.
because governments allowed us to go from 10 to 100 megawatts. I think there's a massive industry there. I mean, the number of energy companies that we are seeing being established.
Right.
I mean, if you just look around, I mean, your room or your neighborhood, you'll see how many,
Yeah.
solar panels,
Yeah,
are
are
on the
coming up.
roofs.
Yeah.
It was, DSTV decoders or dishes,
The urban flower.
the last decade. But now it's,
Yeah.
you've got new roofs.
And the numbers are staggering, Andrew. I just read a report that says that decarbonization, the transitional cost for South Africa, 1.4 trillion rands over the long term, initially 8 billion. So you do the maths. There's lots of money that's required. Who's going to pay for it? Is it all going to be debt? And are our children going to be paying this debt going forward?
So another great question. I can hear you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So the answer to your last question is no. That provided we can actually connect impact and investing as a concept, investing pays for itself. So as we move into a green economy, the blue economy, the carbon economy, we will find new ways to create and recognize value and to return the capital that's invested into that economic activity. So this is very much a case of creating a whole new asset class for the future. The people in time, people won't be investing in coal as an asset class. They will be investing in digital IT. We spoke about education earlier. Education for me is about content and we can actually educate our people like we're doing right now. We have got the tools. We've also got the tools to invest productively and profitably in renewable energy, in water treatment, in dirty water treatment, in desalination. We can invest in oceans profitably. So the new world is on us. We don't really have to make anything up, and we've got the tools to do it and happen.
Okay. And we're going to need to involve Egypt in our 4IR strategy. It's going to be urgent for us to do these webinars with someone in Sharm el-Sheikh. And just without belaboring this point, Martina, somebody asked an interesting question. Why rhinos? Why not bees? Bees are responsible for 80% of pollination globally.
It is very true. Look, I mean, why we went for rhinos is effectively think of it more as a symbol of what humans have been doing to the planet, and that's kind of like how I see it. There are so many causes that you can get behind. It's hard to decide which one. For me, it's the one that gets me up in the morning. It's the passion. So go for the cause that you are most passionate about. Because it makes it so much easier for you to get involved. I just want to, on the renewables, I don't know, I read an article actually last night that Komati Port has been decommissioned as a coal-fired station, as being
repurposed
for renewables. So, if you think about it, that, everything starts small and just start somewhere. There it is already starting to happen. And what is also happening there is that they're setting up a training facility, which will train people in how to set up more renewables. So already there's an industry being created, new jobs that will be created. People will be replaced in the coal, but there's something new starting. And I think that's the good news that people need to see out of this.
And just on this issue of bees, for instance, in my neighborhood, I see people have little boxes, little apiaries in their backyard, and all the honey that they make, they then generously give it to us as neighbors. So you can set up an apiary anonymous in your backyard and help to create a little bit more of that biodiversity just in your backyard. It's the one thing you can do, but just make sure you get a beekeeper suit, because that could end in tears for you very, very much. Let's turn our attention now to SDGs 10 and SDGs 8, reduced inequality and decent work. And I know this is something you're very, very passionate about, Mervyn Shanmugam, because unemployment in South Africa officially is at 33 and a bit percent, but unofficially we're told it's closer to 46%, and the majority of those are young people. Let's get a deep dive into this one sticky issue, because herein lies the South African problem.
Yeah, I think unemployment in South Africa, I think during our initial stages, we talked about a lot of people, entering the economy, coming up through from LSM 1, 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6, which was great for us. But we've had, in the last 10 years, we've had probably a pause, in the economy in terms of growth and in terms of unemployment. So we were really worried about this when COVID hit. And fortunately, Sanlam supported, our asset management business with 2.25 billion rands to support jobs, in the economy, from small businesses to large businesses to medium-sized businesses. And what was very encouraging was most of the funding we applied to small and medium-sized companies, because they really had to survive.
Yeah.
And what this also gives us an opportunity to do is also to look at the growth of these companies, to nurture them, incubate them, sit on their boards and drive their strategy, especially where we take majority stakes, in those companies to drive growth. And I can tell you, very early on, in one of our early investments, we managed to preserve 1,400 jobs, at a critical time.
Yeah.
In South Africa when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And that business has grown, in about 18 months with another 100 jobs. And the second investment we did, also, contributed in our private equity business, significantly,
Right.
To job growth. And we think we'll be on target, through our investor legacy range, where we're doing all of this good work, to help preserve, 27,000 jobs.
You think you're going to do well with your investor legacy range. So tell us a little bit about that program.
Yeah, so that program is focused mostly on job preservation and creation. So as I said, Sanlam we're very, very committed, to try and help us, because SMEs, are the lifeblood, of the industry. If we think about our listed market in South Africa, probably about 300 companies trading, on the listed market. You look at unlisted companies, more than 50,000 unlisted companies, in South Africa. And there's not much attention or capital directed to those businesses, right? So we're worried about small businesses. We don't think that they get enough funding. It's a myth that small businesses are riskier than small and mid-sized businesses are riskier than large businesses. We see a strong pipeline continuously, and I think that's because people just don't understand small businesses. And it's nice to invest in them, because you get to see as to what really goes on in the economy.
Okay, and we know that SMEs account for something like 70% of jobs that are created in South Africa. So we really need those SMEs well capitalized, scaled up, working well. But it's still a sticky issue, joblessness, nursing, for South Africa. And the question is, do we have big ideas? Do we really understand what's needed to solve for this problem?
Yeah, so the jobs discussion, comes up regularly, and it will keep coming up given where the unemployment rate is at the moment. And I think, as we spoke about earlier, there's a fundamental piece that you need to create more jobs, and that's growth, right? So then you have to start asking yourself, what do we need to create more growth in our economy? How do we spur growth? And there's a couple of factors there. There's some legacy issues that prevent us or are hindering us from actually creating more growth. There's a lot of concentration, in our economy around the mining sector that's historical. So I think there are some big systematic changes that have to be made overall for us to start addressing the growth challenge, but also
Yeah.
then, through that contributing to an economy that creates more jobs.
Right.
If you look at the bottom up level, and you think about what Mervin's talking about,
Yeah.
which is more the SME space, and you're funding those businesses,
Right.
giving them the capital to get growing and create more jobs. But then there's even a layer below that, which is like really small
Right.
businesses in the informal sector. And if you look at a lot of other emerging economies, that is where a lot of the jobs
Right.
actually start getting created. In our economy, I think we're probably somewhere in the 10% region in
Right.
terms of jobs that we create in that space. And to give you a real example of what we're talking about here, it's something like street food. So if you look at Asian economies, if you walk around Bangkok or
Yeah.
one of those places, you'll see a lot of street food vendors.
Yeah.
Singapore is the same thing. You need quite relaxed food regulations for that kind
Yeah.
of informal sector to thrive, and we've
Right.
got very stringent food regulations here. So there's some regulatory issues that need to be changed as well. But I think at the end of the day, you can't wait for the big macro plan. I think
Yeah.
what we're seeing is it's very difficult to change that. So you have to do as much as you can from a
Right.
bottom up level to create more jobs and try and stimulate this
It's
thing.
interesting that you say that. Sorry. Okay. Maybe you can answer this as well, Mervyn. Murato wants to know, does Sanlam support small-scale farmers across South Africa? Because if we're talking SME development, in her view, that's really where we need to begin.
Yeah, so I think agriculture and small-scale farming is a potential, employer of a large number of people. Agriculture is something we typically haven't invested in, in the past, and that's because of the large capital. It's very capital intensive, but we've come across quite a few programs recently, that are being promoted by government, where we can partner with them. So the capital we get, right, mostly is from pensioners, and we have to make sure that where we're investing is relatively safe for them to get their capital back first and to make a good return.
Yeah.
And for agriculture, we definitely need partnerships. So there's lots of discussions, with government, on how we can partner with other international, development finance institutions, and the role of and their role is to try and de-risk those projects for us, so that we can mobilize lots of capital, like what Andrew's doing, in infrastructure. Where he can probably, rotate that capital in his fund three times to have meaningful, scalable impact.
Little bit of a digression. Amplify's business model, please, for those who are interested, is what Anonymous is asking.
So effectively what we do is we partner with small boutique asset managers, both in unit trust and hedge funds. Typically, these are people that have left the large asset managers. They've set up their own business, and they are very highly skilled in managing money, but they just don't have the capital for distribution. So effectively, they'll partner up with a business such as Amplify. We build the distribution, we build the brand. We're in the fortunate position to plug them into the Sanlam distribution, grow their assets along with ourselves.
Okay, so we've looked at different strategies for job creation and impact. Anonymous wants to know, Nurse, and Ame, how can we even begin to talk the macro picture stuff, the big economic growth stuff, if we can't even generate the right stock of foreign direct investment to flow into the country, given the investment climate in South Africa, the political climate, Anonymous is saying, which the government can't even get a handle on?
Yeah, this point is going to become more topical with the whole grey listing threat looming, I'm afraid. But I think, and the reason I mention that is because within that are some hopefully very positive things. I think we've seen a very strong response now from the government to try and avoid us getting onto the grey list, and that will be a very, very positive outcome if we do. I don't disagree with the point that, we need more foreign direct investment. We need the capital coming into South Africa. I think step one of that is going to be to avoid grey listing. Otherwise, this point is going to be a very
and just remind us, grey listing, it's the banks who weren't really introducing proper checks and balances for money flowing out.
Yes, on clients coming in and money flowing out. So know your client checks effectively. There's a certain standard of practices that are expected as far as that's concerned. But we have a chance, and hopefully we will make it.
And Hercules sort of echoes the sentiments that came about the government's role in almost, I paraphrase, sabotaging the economic environment, saying charity starts at home. South Africa needs much higher growth, higher unemployment rates and better education, or higher employment rates, higher growth, better education. In my view, sustainable investment should focus on these objectives. Support should be given to those companies who stand up against government's destructive policies, says Hercules. Is that a fair terminology to use?
Yeah, I think you can see, I mean, the themes that we are trying to address, through our business, definitely focuses on, job creation, climate, reducing inequalities. But for us, it's not only about, the jobs we create. It's the quality of the jobs we create. We want to have highly skilled people in the economy producing a very high level, of output. And then I come back to, I mean, the biggest drivers of productivity in South Africa is human capital and ICT, right? So if we can drive investments into those two sectors, and unfortunately, as my daughter says, you're talking about infrastructure again. It does come down to infrastructure. You need.
How old is your daughter?
She's 21.
Okay, you are talking about infrastructure again.
But on this point, I think, and it's not to take away from it, right? But a lot of the conversation centers around government's inadequacies, government's failures, what government is not doing, what's not happening at the top, and you have that position. It is what's there, and inevitably you have to get something fixed there. But it shouldn't be a reason for us not to do anything else. There's a lot that can still happen at the bottom up, and the private sector is mobilizing. All of us come from a business that is mobilizing more into solving these issues from a private sector perspective. To solve these SDGs, there's no doubt that you will need more mobilization from the private sector. So I think, all I want to encourage is just a view that says, we need the government to come right, but we can also do a lot ourselves.
Corporate citizenship. I want to turn our attention to SDG number 2. As you're saying, we need to do the right stuff investment-wise, but we can also do the right things socially. And I want to focus on zero hunger. Do you know, across Africa, it said that 2/3 of arable land hasn't been farmed yet, so there's a missed opportunity. But in that context, there's also nearly 1 billion people worldwide from east to west who simply don't have enough to eat. And this is unconscionable, Nurse Naidu, that in a world of so much wealth, there are people who literally go to bed hungry. And that's in Asia, that's in Africa, that's even in America.
Yeah, it is absolutely unconscionable. I think, addressing that problem is something, it's quite close to home for us. I think Look, the challenge in Africa, 2/3 of the arable land, isn't being farmed properly. There's a lot of discussion about that. How much of it is under conservation? How much of it is under forest? How much of it can you actually farm? When you think about, I think agriculture as a sector, and you start thinking about what do you need? So you need better seeds. Seeds that are more resilient and will produce better crop. You need more fertilizer. You need more irrigation. I think the last numbers I saw said the cost of irrigation alone that we need to actually improve Africa's yield in terms of crops would be something like $65 billion. But at the same time, if that investment comes in, you could increase Africa's agricultural production 2 to 3 times, which is quite phenomenal if you can get it right. But again, money needs to go there. Where that money comes from, whether it's governments or whether it's private sector, we have to find ways to mobilize and align it. And if we can do it, and you can get Africa producing 2 to 3 times more grains and cereals and all of those things, then I think you make a material contribution to reducing that number of people who are going to bed hungry every night.
But zero hunger isn't just a function of farming, Martinez. I don't know if you've been to the supermarket lately. Food prices are soaring, and they're soaring because of politics, geopolitical issues, Russia, Ukraine, and all manner of other issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, it is a scary thing when you go shopping, right? And I always think about, once you do that, you think of the privileged position that you're in, and it gives you an idea of, what people that are earning assessor grant and assessor grant only, or COVID grant at 350 rand a month, how tough it must be for them. An interesting thing that I also read the other day was that there is, in fact, enough food being produced in the world to feed all people.
Yeah.
The fact is, the slippage and the wastage that is occurring is half the problem. And then obviously in war-torn countries, I think 60% of the issue that you talked about, the billion people that are going hungry, is sitting actually in war-torn countries where food is used as a mechanism. Against the people.
I think I think you're right. And there are a lot of charities that are sort of going into the waste baskets of retailers and saying, let's see those expiry dates and maybe we can repurpose the food. There's also a concept, Mervyn, of urban poverty versus rural poverty. Poverty is poverty, but in the rural areas, there is an opportunity to grow your own food. In a city, it's not so easy.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think, as Martinez was saying, you really got to try and see, where the opportunities are. So I think Nelson started this, this project for us at Sanlam Investments, where we are trying to bring the gardens to our cities, and some of them, are in our offices and dispersed, all around Cape Town. Nelson, Nelson can speak a little bit more.
Are we looking at pictures of it here now?
Yeah. So. So I think, those are some of the things that we, that we can try and do, and I think like urbanization, with the urbanization of populations, and the problems we have with food security, we have to, and the disruption of supply chains, right, which is a major issue. We've got to find new solutions. Some things, new farming techniques like hydroponics, should be examined. So lots of inventive ways, to try and disrupt old ways of farming and maybe new ways.
Okay, very briefly, do you want to tell us about what you've got the organization doing at Sanlam Investments?
Yeah, so we obviously, like I said earlier, 2 years ago decided we want to really be an asset manager that makes a contribution to sustainability, and it's part of the purpose of the business. But it's sometimes not easy to make that very tangible for all your staff. So we try to think of a way to make it very tangible for our staff, for them to experience it. So we set up these gardens. So we've got one. I think the one you're seeing on the screen behind us now is a rooftop garden at our offices. So this is on the roof at our business. The staff planted it. The proceeds from the garden go into the canteen at the office and to schools around the area. We've got similar initiatives at primary schools in the area around the office, where I think we're feeding about 600 children now every day out of those gardens, which is great. So it gave the staff an opportunity to see, what you can do from an impact perspective, but also, to your point on it's hard to grow gardens in the city. Most of them asked us to help them, give them starter packs to start their own gardens at home. So all of us can reduce our, supermarket bill a little bit by, maybe planting some of our own vegetables or whatever. It's something you can do, and it's all part of sustainability.
And it's organic and it's clean. Okay, we've got a few minutes left, and I think let's just go through some of the issues that our audience would like answered. Andrew in Sharm el Sheikh, fundraising. So many questions around fundraising. So the first one is, how do you raise funds for climate solution? How do you deploy capital? And what are bankable projects?
Okay. We raise funds using something called blended finance. And this builds on the thesis that the world is getting more risky as we go forward. Capital needs to be more risk absorbent. The way we make that absorbency is we combine public sector capital with private sector capital. That's what the blending is about. And that then really does result in different types of financing models. Here you then have people like national governments and institutions like Sanlam coming together, combining their capital in a strategic way and deploying it into new areas of need. Now, what makes them more risky is because it's new technology, it's maybe new business models, it's at a greater scale, and in some instances, the new jurisdictions. All of those things are things that financiers pause and think about before they actually go in there. So in Sanlam, we are practitioners of blended. We design these blended finance vehicles, and we have 3 at the moment. One focused on renewable energy, another one focused on water and oceans, and a third, which we're about to launch, focused on hydrogen.
Okay.
Because hydrogen really is the pathway to a sustainable energy future. That's what we do. How do we raise the capital? Well, we tell the story. We tell the story to both the public sector and the private sector. We focus on the needs, where we can actually make a difference.
Right.
And we put them into specific structures, and then we deploy people behind it. So we are active in Africa. We're active in South and Southeast Asia and Latin America. And that's what brings me here.
And very quickly, Andrew, we're also told that we are putting this heavy emphasis on IPPs and renewables, and yet we know if the sun's not out, you can't make electricity. If the wind's not blowing, you can't make electricity. So the weather being intermittent makes this an unreliable alternative.
That is correct. But there are 2 ways you can store energy technically, which is doable. One is you can put it into batteries. The other thing is you can store it in hydrogen molecules. So the future between that intermittent energy generation is actually to store that energy in storage carriers, and then release energy somewhere down the future. And South Africa is in a really prime position to be a leader in the energy in the hydrogen economy globally.
Now I want to know if you're all leaders in sound bites. What are the thoughts you would like to leave our delegates with today?
Yeah, so I think, pick one of the SDGs that we discussed today, and try and make a personal contribution.
Right, Martinez?
Can I steal somebody's quote?
Go ahead.
Think big, start small, act now.
Oh, wow. Nelson?
Yeah, everybody can make a difference. Stop worrying about the big things. Start with yourself and do something.
Andrew?
Sorry, Lorato.
So one thought you'd like to leave our delegates with today.
All right. Be positive. Be positive. There's been lots of challenges and lots of oh my God moments on this discussion. Be positive. We can solve it. We have the energy. We have the intellect. We have the tools. Be positive. Get up in the morning. Let's go fix stuff.
Okay, Nike, get it done. And Nelson, a final question to you. Sustainability is also about South Africa's future. So what do you say to that?
Absolutely, and we are extremely optimistic about what we can do to contribute to South Africa's sustainability, and we will absolutely keep doing it until we get there.
All right, so what I'm garnering from the conversation here today is there's a lot of things to consider. Those 17 goals are overwhelming. Pick the few that realistically you can achieve in your day-to-day life, in your investment strategy, and just in the community around you. Because as Mahatma Gandhi once said, it's up to you to be the change you want to see. But as we wind down our conversation, I want to refer you to Tony Robinson, who said, the only limit to your impact is your imagination. So if you can imagine it, then really and truly you can do it. And that's the thought we want to leave you with on this edition of Critical Conversations. It's been a year of discussing sustainability for the people, for the planet, and for shared prosperity. It can happen when we take it incrementally to just be the change we want to see. Remember, a good leader, as we heard, is a good follower, and all of our executives have shown that in their corporate strategy, they've deployed the instruments of what it is to be a good corporate citizen as well. They follow, and in that way, they lead. We've observed a little bit of what it takes to lead in South Africa. We urge you to do the same. Continue the conversation on Twitter and on LinkedIn using the hashtag Critical Conversations. Tag us at Sanlam Investments. We look forward to hosting you again in year 2023. Sustaining South Africa, that's what we're about. And we know you can do it too. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you at home. See you in 2023 for the 2023 installment of Critical Conversations brought to you by Sanlam Investments. You can, we can, and we will. Have a great Christmas. Cheers.